Not even millionaire in-laws were going to take my wife away with threats just because I wasn't from high society like them, but together we survived their attacks. It was one of those Sunday mornings you wish you could freeze in time. The sunlight slanted through the large living room windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air as if celebrating our silence. Laura was sitting on the blue velvet sofa, her legs tucked under her, holding a steaming cup of coffee. She looked at me and smiled. That smile was the reason I worked 50 hours a week. The reason we had saved every penny for the last 5 years to buy this house. "It's so quiet today, James," she said, with that soft voice that always managed to calm my anxieties. "I know. We finally finished the renovations," I replied. "It's finally our home," Laura said. I sat down next to her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours. We had invested nearly $40,000 remodeling the kitchen and bathrooms, money we had scraped together with a Herculean effort. I'm an architect and she's a graphic designer. We both appreciated order, aesthetics, and above all, peace. A peace that had cost us a lot to achieve, especially considering where Laura came from. Her family, the Sterlings, were an institution unto themselves, people of old money, hyphenated names, and harsh judgments. Richard and Regina, my in-laws, had never approved of our marriage. To them, I was a nice guy with limited aspirations, a polite way of saying I wasn't rich enough for their daughter. During the 3 years we had been married, their visits had been sporadic, cold, and calculated. They always notified us weeks in advance, as if they were royalty scheduling a diplomatic tour. That's why, when the doorbell rang at 9 in the morning on that sacred Sunday, bursting our bubble of tranquility, I felt a chill. We weren't expecting anyone, hadn't ordered food, and didn't have friends who dropped by unannounced. Laura tensed under my arm. "Are you expecting someone?" she asked, setting her cup on the coffee table with a nervous clatter. "No, I'll go check," I said. I got up and walked to the entrance. Looking through the peephole, my heart skipped a beat, not from excitement, but from a premonition of disaster. There they were, Richard, in his impeccable cream-colored linen suit, looking impatiently at his gold wristwatch, and Regina, wrapped in a light silk coat, wearing that perpetual expression of having smelled something unpleasant. But what froze my blood wasn't their presence, but what was behind them. The driver of a private car was unloading 3 large leather suitcases and 2 handbags. "It's your parents," I whispered, turning toward Laura, who had approached the hallway. Her face lost all color. "What? But they didn't call. Why do they have suitcases?" she asked. I opened the door before they could ring the bell again in that insistent, authoritarian way. "Richard, Regina," I exclaimed, forcing the falsest smile in my repertoire. "What a surprise! We didn't know you were coming." Richard didn't greet me. He simply gestured to the driver to leave the suitcases on the threshold and then walked into my house as if he were a health inspector arriving at a clandestine slaughterhouse. Regina followed him, passing me without looking, her eyes scanning the foyer with laser precision. "James," she said dryly. The traffic was dreadful. "I need a glass of mineral water, no ice, with a slice of lemon." Laura stepped forward, trembling slightly. "Mom, Dad, did something happen? Why did you bring luggage?" Regina stopped in the middle of the living room, ignoring her daughter's question. She took off her sunglasses and held them like a scepter. She looked at the newly polished wooden floor, then the walls painted a soft gray, and finally, the blue sofa. "Laura, darling, you look terrible," was the first thing Regina said. There was no hello, no hug. Just a direct criticism of her daughter's appearance, even though she looked beautiful in her cotton pajamas. "Those dark circles," Regina continued. "Is it that James doesn't let you sleep? Or is it the stress of living in this place?" "This place?" I intervened, closing the door behind the driver, and feeling my body temperature rise. "Regina, we just remodeled. This is the house we always wanted." Richard, who was inspecting the window frames with his index finger, let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Remodeled is a strong word, James. Let's say you washed its face." He turned to me with that patronizing look that made me feel like a 5-year-old. "How much did you spend on these windows?" "The insulation seems second-rate. I hear a car passing 2 blocks away. They are double-pane windows, Richard. They cost us $5,000. They are excellent," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. $5,000, he repeated, shaking his head as if I had thrown the money in the trash. "They saw you coming, boy. I know a supplier who installs bulletproof glass imported from Germany for $8,000. But of course one must have the contacts in the capital." Laura tried to mediate, as she always did. "Dad, please, sit down. Do you want breakfast?" We were about to make something. Regina sighed dramatically and let herself fall onto our new sofa. She grimaced, as if the cushion were filled with rocks. "I suppose we'll have to eat here. I don't think there are any decent restaurants in this picturesque neighborhood." Regina looked at Laura. "But don't you cook, darling? James, surely you know how to make something basic, right? Some scrambled eggs, perhaps?" "Laura needs to rest. Look at her, she's skin and bones." "I'm fine, Mom. I weigh the same as I did in college," Laura defended, though her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't contradict me," Regina cut in coldly. "Mothers know. You look sickly. And it doesn't surprise me." She made a vague gesture encompassing the whole house. "The environment influences health." I went to the kitchen to avoid saying something I would regret. While I beat the eggs with unnecessary force, I listened to their voices in the living room. I couldn't help it. The open-plan acoustics we liked so much were now my enemy. "And those suitcases?" I heard Laura ask again. There was a brief silence. "We had a problem with the plumbing at the mansion," Richard lied, though his tone sounded too rehearsed. "A terrible flood in the East Wing. The contractors say it will take weeks. We couldn't stay there with the noise and dust. We thought about going to the Ritz, but your mother insisted it was a sign to come see you. Weeks? Laura's voice trembled. You're going to stay here for weeks? Does it bother you? Regina's voice sharpened. We are your parents, Laura. We gave you everything. And now it bothers you to give us shelter when we are in a crisis? Wow, how quickly gratitude is forgotten when one marries certain people. I returned to the living room with a tray. I served breakfast in silence, trying to process the information. Weeks. They had barely been here 10 minutes and I already felt like I was running out of air. During breakfast, the siege continued. Regina criticized the coffee. Too acidic. Surely a cheap blend. The bread was too hard. And even the tableware. Is this artisanal? Regina asked, lifting the plate and looking at the base. How rustic. It reminds me of when we went on mission trips to poor villages. Did you not have the money for decent porcelain? I could have gifted you one of my old sets stored in the basement. They are worth about $2,000, but for you two, it would be a luxury. We like this style, Regina. It's modern, I said, gritting my teeth. Modern is an excuse for cheap, she sentenced. When they finished eating, Richard got up and announced he was going to inspect the rest of the property to see if it was safe. Regina stayed with Laura and me at the table. The atmosphere was dense, charged with static electricity. Well, Regina said, wiping the corner of her lips with a paper napkin she looked at with disdain before dropping it. Let's speak clearly. We didn't just come for the plumbing. That was the trigger, but the reality is that we are very worried about you, Laura. Laura straightened in her chair, nervous. Worried? Why? I have a job, I have my house, I'm married. Exactly. Regina interrupted. You have a job that consumes you, a house that, well, is a project. And you are married to James. She looked me directly in the eyes for the first time since arriving. There was no warmth in her gaze, only cold calculation. James, let's be honest. You are a hard-working man. No one takes that away from you. But you are not a sterling. You cannot give Laura the standard of living she belongs to. Look at her, she's dull. Her shine is gone. I see her radiant. I replied firmly. And we are happy. We have our plans, our savings. Savings, Richard scoffed, entering the room again. I heard that. James, boy, your savings are what I spend on a business dinner with my partners. I saw your home office. A small desk, a computer that must be 2 years old. Is that how you intend to build a future? Designing houses for the lower middle class? I design sustainable homes, Richard. I have important clients. The last project paid me $15,000 just for the initial blueprints, I said, falling into the trap of justifying myself. Richard let out a laugh. $15,000, what a fortune. He clapped sarcastically. Laura, your cousin Edward closed a deal last week for $500,000 in real estate. That is success. What your husband does is survive. Laura stood up, hitting the table with her palms. It was a small gesture, but for her, who had always been submissive before them, it was monumental. Enough. I won't allow you to speak like that about James in his own house. We are doing well. We don't need your millions to be happy. Regina looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. Oh, Laura, how tender you are. Love doesn't pay medical bills when you get sick from stress. Love doesn't buy you security. Love ends when poverty enters through the door, and believe me, poverty is already installed in the furniture here. Regina stood up and walked to the window, turning her back to us. We have made a decision, she said with a definitive tone. Richard and I will stay here for a few days to supervise how you really live. But the long-term solution is different. I stood up slowly. What decision? Nobody asked you to make decisions about our life. Regina turned, ignoring me again, and addressed Laura. We want you to come back home, Laura. To the big house. Temporarily, of course. Let's say 6 months or a year. Whatever it takes for you to recover. The silence that followed was deafening. Laura looked at her mother as if she had grown a second head. What? Laura asked with a threat of a voice. Leave James? Don't call it leaving him, said Richard, pouring himself a glass of my whiskey $150 bottle I was saving for special occasions without asking. Call it a strategic pause. You need to return to your roots, eat well, sleep in Egyptian cotton sheets, surround yourself with people of your level. James can stay here, taking care of his little house. You can see each other on weekends, if he behaves. You're crazy, I said, my voice rising in volume. This is absurd. Laura is my wife, we live together. She is not going anywhere. Regina took a step toward me, invading my personal space. She smelled of expensive perfume and malice. You don't decide, James. Look at her. She pointed to Laura, who was pale and teary-eyed. You are killing her slowly with this mediocre life. If you truly loved her, you would let her go so she can recover. But you are selfish. You want to have her here, locked in this shoebox, cooking and cleaning for you while you play architect. I don't have her locked up. She chooses to be here, I replied, though I felt the low blow. Chooses? Regina laughed. Laura has never known how to choose. She has always needed guidance, and we have returned to give it to her. Mom, I'm not going to leave, Laura said, though her voice trembled. I love James. This is my house. Regina changed tactics instantly. Her face transformed into a mask of maternal pain and disappointment. She brought a hand to her chest. Is this how you repay me? After everything I've suffered, your father and I are getting old, Laura. The house feels empty, and now, with the flood, we are vulnerable. I thought you would want to take care of us. I thought you would want to be close to your mother in a difficult moment. But I see this man has brainwashed you. He has turned you against your own blood. Laura lowered her gaze. The manipulation was expert, surgical. Regina knew exactly which buttons to press. Guilt, filial duty, the fear of being a bad daughter. It's not that, Mom. It's just that wanting to take me to live there without James is crazy. It is for your own good, Richard insisted. Besides, James couldn't live in our house. He wouldn't fit in. The servants would feel uncomfortable taking orders from someone who, well, you know, someone who doesn't know how to distinguish a fish fork from a salad fork. I felt anger bubbling in my stomach like acid. Enough, I said with a firm voice. You can stay tonight if you really have a problem at your house. Although I sincerely doubt that flood story. But I will not tolerate more insults. And Laura is not moving out. That is not up for discussion. Regina looked at me with pure hatred. Are you kicking me out? Me, Regina Sterling? I am setting boundaries in my house, I replied. Your house? She scoffed. You bought this house with a mortgage that is surely drowning you. Technically, it belongs to the bank. If we wanted to, we could buy your debt tomorrow and throw you out on the street. Don't challenge us, James. Laura sobbed. Please. Stop. Please. Richard approached Laura and put a heavy hand on her shoulder. Daughter, listen to your mother. Pack a small suitcase. Just come for a few days. Try it. You'll see how good you feel away from all this pressure. We will give you an allowance of $5,000 a month for your personal expenses. You won't have to work on those silly graphics you do. You can dedicate yourself to the club, to charity, to what women of your class do. My work isn't silly, Laura whispered. But the doubt was already sown in her eyes. Not doubt about whether to leave, but doubt about her ability to resist their pressure. The following days were hell on earth. As I had predicted, they didn't leave that night. They settled into the guest room, which also served as my secondary studio. Richard criticized the mattress as medieval torture, the shower pressure as a pathetic drip, and the temperature too hot, no high-power central air conditioning. Regina, for her part, took control of the house. On Monday, when I arrived from work, I found she had rearranged the living room. She had moved the furniture, stored our paintings too depressing in a closet, and placed fresh flowers she had bought herself, sending me the $200 bill. The space breathes better this way, she said when she saw me enter, paralyzed by surprise. Everything was so cluttered, it needed light. Where are my blueprints? I asked, noticing the side table where I had left some sketches was empty. Those dirty papers? I threw them away. I thought it was trash. They were full of scribbles. I felt the blood drain to my feet. Those were the final sketches for the community center project. I have to submit them tomorrow. Well, you should be more orderly. In a decent house, one doesn't leave work lying around in the living room. It's in poor taste. Laura arrived shortly after, looking exhausted. Regina intercepted her at the door. Look at that face. Richard, she's gray. Laura, my life, I already spoke with Dr. Valladares. He expects you tomorrow at 10. You have to get a complete checkup. Mom, I have work tomorrow, I can't miss it. I already called your boss, Regina said naturally, examining her nails. I told him you had a family emergency and that you would take the week off. He was very understanding when I mentioned who my husband was. I think he was even scared. Laura dropped her purse, stunned. You did what? Mom, that is unacceptable. They can fire me. They aren't going to fire you. And if they do, better. That little job isn't taking you anywhere. Besides, we already told you the offer. Come home, forget all this. That night, the tension exploded during dinner. I had ordered food from a quite good Italian restaurant trying to avoid another critique of my cooking, but of course, the pasta was overcooked and the sauce was canned according to them. Richard opened a bottle of wine he brought from his personal reserve. He didn't offer me any. Laura, Richard said, swirling the glass. The moving truck is coming tomorrow. Laura and I looked at each other. What? We said in unison. For your things, Richard clarified. Your mother and I have decided that enough is enough. This experience of humble life has served for you to value what you had. But it's over. Tomorrow you pack and come with us. No, said Laura. Excuse me? Regina arched an eyebrow. I said no. I am not going to leave. And I am not going to allow you to keep insulting my husband and destroying my home. You have to leave, now, or tomorrow first thing. But this is over. Richard slammed his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. Insolent girl, how dare you speak to us like that? We are your parents. We have given you everything. If you stay here with this loser, we will disinherit you. Do you hear me? Not a penny. Those trust funds, the beach properties, the investment funds, it will all disappear. You will be left with nothing. Living in this hovel, counting coins to pay for the lights. I looked at Laura. She was trembling. Tears were running down her cheeks, but her jaw was set tight. It was the decisive moment. I knew the economic threat was Richard's strongest weapon. Millions of dollars were at stake. Regina stood up, her face red with contained rage. Choose, Laura. Right now. Either you take your suitcases and come with us to a life of dignity, or you stay here rotting in mediocrity and forget you have a mother. And I warn you, if you stay, I will make sure no one in our social circle speaks to you again. You will be a pariah. Silence took over the room. The wall clock marked the seconds like the beats of a dying heart. I didn't say anything. I knew she had to fight this battle. If I intervened, it would always be James manipulated her. It had to be her voice. Laura stood up slowly. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand and looked at her parents, not like the scared girl she had been all her life, but like the woman I loved. You know something? Laura began, with a low but firm voice. I was always afraid of losing your money. I always thought that without your safety net I would fall into the void, but I look around. I look at this house we painted together. I look at James, who makes me coffee every morning. I look at my life, and I realize that I already have everything I need. Don't say romantic stupidities, Richard spat. It's not romanticism, Dad, it's reality. You are miserable. You have millions of dollars, mansions, trips, and yet, you came here on a Sunday morning to try to destroy my happiness because you can't stand seeing that I am happy without your rules. Shut up! Screamed Regina. I won't shut up! Shouted Laura, with a force that made her mother recoil. Leave! Get out of my house and take your money, your criticism, and your poison. I don't want your $5,000 a month. I don't want your inheritances. I prefer eating stale bread with James on this cheap sofa than dining on caviar with you and feeling empty inside. Richard turned purple. He looked about to have a heart attack. You're going to regret this, Laura. When this guy leaves you for a younger one or when you go bankrupt because he is incompetent, don't come crying to my door. It will be closed. I'll take the risk, she said. Then she looked at me. James, please open the door for them. I walked to the entrance and opened the door wide. The night was cool. Out, I said simply. Richard and Regina looked at each other. For a second, I saw doubt in Regina's eyes, perhaps a flash of terror realizing she had lost control over her most precious possession, but pride won. She smoothed her coat, lifted her chin, and walked toward the exit. Don't expect anything from us, Richard said as he passed me, bumping his shoulder into mine. Nothing. I never did, I replied. They went out into the darkness. The driver, who had been waiting in the car the whole time, probably under orders to be ready for extraction, turned on the headlights. Richard and Regina got into the car without looking back. The suitcases were still in the guest room, but they didn't care. They preferred losing the clothes to the indignity of having to carry them themselves. I closed the door. The sound of the deadbolt sliding was the most beautiful sound I had heard in years. I turned to Laura. She was still standing by the table, breathing heavily. Her legs failed her, and she collapsed into the chair. I ran to her and hugged her. She cried, but it wasn't a cry of sadness. It was a cry of liberation, like a storm clearing the sky after years of drought. I did it, she sobbed. I really did it. You did it. My love, you were incredible. We stayed like that for a long time, in the silence of our house, which suddenly no longer felt invaded but reclaimed. But we knew this wasn't the end. People like Richard and Regina don't disappear so easily. Their silence would only be the prelude to a cold war, or something worse. And we had to be ready. The silence that followed my in-laws' departure wasn't empty. It was heavy, dense, like the air before an electrical storm. Laura was still sitting in the dining chair, staring blankly at the closed door, as if expecting Richard to kick the wood down at any moment to reclaim his property. I approached her cautiously. I knew the adrenaline of the moment was fading, and now the shock of reality would come. They're gone, I whispered, placing a hand on her cold hand. Laura blinked, returning to the present. They left? She stammered, and then let out a nervous laugh that bordered on hysteria. And they left the suitcases. James, they left $5,000 Louis Vuitton suitcases in our guest room. We'll send them tomorrow, I said firmly. I'll pay for a rush courier service. I don't want them setting foot here again to pick them up. That night we didn't sleep. We lay in bed, staring at the ceiling in the dark, holding hands. The euphoria of having set limits mixed with the visceral terror of the consequences. Richard wasn't a man who accepted a no. He was a man who destroyed what he couldn't control. Do you think he was serious about the inheritance? Laura asked in a whisper around 3 in the morning. Totally, I replied without sugarcoating the truth. I think he'll call his lawyers first thing tomorrow. It's millions, James, millions of dollars. And the properties, the lake house, where I went as a girl. Her voice cracked, but it wasn't greed I heard, but grief. She was losing her past. What are we going to do if he tries to block your career? He has contacts in all the big construction firms. I turned to look at her, though I could barely make out her features in the gloom. We will survive. We are good at what we do, Laura, and we are free. That is worth more than any lake house. The next morning, the war began. But not with explosions. Rather, with a devastating administrative and social silence. The first thing we did was manage Laura's work crisis. She called her boss at 8 o'clock sharp. I heard her from the kitchen, my stomach churning. Her voice was professional, but I could sense the underlying tremor. She had to explain, with deep shame, that her mother had had an episode of confusion and that there was no such family emergency or need for a week off. Her boss, a pragmatic man, accepted the explanation, but the damage to her reputation was done. She was no longer the reliable designer. Now she was the employee with the unstable and dramatic family. While she dealt with that, I gathered my in-laws' suitcases. They weighed a ton, loaded with judgments and pretensions. I called a courier service and spent $150 to send them to the Sterling mansion with return receipt requested. I didn't include a note. The message was the act itself. Then, I sat in front of my computer to reconstruct the blueprints Regina had thrown in the trash. Anger was my fuel. I worked for 14 hours straight, redrawing every line, every dimension, every detail of the community center. My eyes burned, my back screamed, but I didn't stop until the design was even better than the original. When I finished, it was 2 in the morning on Tuesday. Laura appeared with a sandwich and a glass of milk. You look exhausted, she said, massaging my shoulders. I am, but they aren't going to win, Laura. They aren't going to have the satisfaction of seeing us fail. The following months were a test of endurance. Regina's threat about the social circle was fulfilled with terrifying efficiency. Family friends who had known Laura since she was born stopped inviting her to events. When we crossed paths with someone we knew at the supermarket or on the street, they turned their backs or looked at their phones with sudden interest. Laura was erased from the guest list of the annual charity gala she herself had helped organize for years. It was painful to see her suffer that rejection. She cried many nights, not for the party itself, but for the confirmation that those relationships were transactional, based on her last name and not her person. They are hypocrites, she would say, wiping away tears. All of them. They are loyal to money, not friendship, I would remind her. We are doing a cleanup, love. Only the real remains. Our financial situation also tightened. Without the implicit safety net of the Sterlings, any unforeseen expense felt like a threat. Laura's car broke down 2 months after the visit. An $800 repair that unbalanced our monthly budget. We had to sit down and crunch real numbers, eliminating dining out, unnecessary subscriptions, and postponing the purchase of new furniture. We learned to enjoy austerity. Our weekends, previously full of mandatory social engagements, were now ours. We cooked together, and yes, I learned to make a homemade tomato sauce that didn't taste canned. We took long walks in the park that didn't cost a cent, and read books borrowed from the public library. We discovered that intimacy flourishes in simplicity. Without the shadow of Richard and Regina judging every move, our house began to feel truly like a refuge. The laughter was more genuine, the conversations, deeper. We became an armored team. But the real turning point came 6 months later, in November. I was in the middle of building the community center. The project was going well, but the profit margins were tight. One afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. It was a lawyer. "Mr. James, I represent Mr. Richard Sterling," said the dry voice on the other end of the line. I felt my blood freeze. I was on the construction site, hard hat on, background noise of drills. "What does he want?" I asked, stepping away to a quieter zone. "Mr. Sterling is restructuring his assets. He has instructed me to offer you and your wife a buyout of your current property. He offers 30% above market value. In cash. The condition is that you sell the house and relocate, preferably to another state." I stayed mute for a second. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a bribe for us to disappear. They wanted to erase us from the geographic map because they couldn't erase us from the emotional map. "And if we say no, Mr. Sterling asked me to remind you that the architecture sector is small and reputations are fragile. It would be a pity if rumors surfaced about structural instability in your designs." The threat was clear. Richard was willing to destroy my professional career. I hung up the phone without answering, shaking with rage. That night I told Laura. I expected her to get scared, to doubt. After all, we were talking about our livelihood. But Laura surprised me. She got up from the sofa, went to her desk, and took out a folder. "If they want to play dirty, we will play smart," she said with a determination I had never seen in her. "James, I've been working on something." She opened the folder. They were designs, logos, brand strategies. I have been contacting small businesses and entrepreneurs who can't pay the big agencies my parents recommend. I have 3 confirmed clients. I am going to resign from my job next week and open my own design studio, here, at home. "Laura, that is risky. If Richard comes for me." "Let him come," she interrupted me. "If he blocks your name in the big firms, then we will work with the rebels, with the independents, with the people who hate guys like my father. There is a whole market out there of people who value authenticity. You design the spaces. I design the identity. We offer the full package, architecture and branding." I looked at her, amazed. The submissive woman who feared disappointing mommy had vanished. In her place was a visionary businesswoman forged in the fire of rejection. "Do you think it will work?" I asked. "It has to work, because we don't have a plan B. And because I am not going to let them intimidate us." We rejected the lawyer's offer with a 1-line formal letter. "Our house is not for sale, and neither is our dignity." Richard fulfilled his threat halfway. "I lost potential contracts in the following month, rumors," client said. It was a hard blow. We lost nearly $10,000 in projected income. We ate rice and beans for weeks. There were nights when Laura cried out of frustration because we couldn't afford to fix the heating when it broke in the middle of winter and we had to sleep with 3 blankets. "Did we make a mistake?" she asked me one freezing night, curled up against my chest, seeking warmth. "No," I told her, kissing her forehead. "Because that money came with chains. This cold is ours. This house is ours. And we will get out of this." And we did. The community center project opened in the spring. It was a resounding success. Not for luxury, but for functionality and the warmth of the design. The local press dedicated an extensive article to it. They didn't mention Richard Sterling. They mentioned James, the architect who understood the needs of real people. That article brought the attention of an eco-housing cooperative. They didn't care about elite rumors. They cared about sustainable results. They hired me for a 3-year project. The advance was $20,000. At the same time, Laura's studio, Free Design, took off. Her clients were artisanal bakeries, tech startups, and NGOs, passionate people. Laura worked more hours than ever, but she shone with her own light. She no longer had circles under her eyes from sadness, but from satisfying fatigue. A year after the suitcase incident, we received an invitation. It was a thick card, with gold embossed letters. Richard and Regina's golden anniversary. 50 years married. The party would be at the most exclusive country club in the city. Laura held the invitation as if it were a radioactive object. They invited us, she said, incredulous. It's a trap, I said. Or an exhibition. They want to show that the perfect family is still united. They want the photo. There is a note. Laura turned the card over. With Regina's perfect and aristocratic calligraphy, it said, "We hope you have overcome your rebellious phase. It would be regrettable if you were not present to honor those who gave you life. P.S. Inappropriately." Laura read the note twice. Then, she walked to the kitchen, turned on the stove burner, and brought the corner of the card to the fire. "What are you doing?" I asked, though I was smiling. "Honoring my life," she replied, watching the expensive paper curl and blacken until it turned to ash. "My life with you." We didn't go to the party. That Saturday night, while I imagine Richard and Regina were surrounded by hundreds of friends who only went for the free champagne and gossip, we had our own celebration. With the money we had saved thanks to our new contracts, we finished the last phase of the house renovation. A wooden deck in the backyard, built with my own hands and decorated by Laura with warm lights and native plants, we prepared a spectacular dinner. We bought a $40 wine, the most expensive we had ever paid for, and toasted under the stars. "Do you regret anything?" I asked her, watching the light from the string lights reflect in her eyes. Laura thought for a moment. "I regret having taken so long to tell them no," she said. "I regret the years I spent trying to be the doll they wanted, but I don't regret losing the money, nor the status, nor the lake house." She leaned toward me and kissed me. "Look at what we have, James. No one tells us what time to sleep, what to eat, or how to decorate. No one criticizes us. We are building our own empire, one made of respect and hard work. And love," I added. "And love," she confirmed. "By the way, I have news." I tensed a little, thinking of some problem with a client. "What's wrong?" Laura smiled. A smile that illuminated the whole garden, brighter than any designer lamp. "That guest room, the one my parents used, I think we have to remodel it again." "Why?" I asked, confused. "It turned out fine after we got that stale perfume smell out." "Yes, but it's not suitable for a crib," she said softly. "We are going to need a crib in about 7 months." I froze, the wine glass halfway to my lips. The world stopped, the city noises disappeared, only she existed, and the news she had just dropped. "Are you?" "Yes, we are going to be parents, James." I set the glass on the table with a trembling hand and hugged her, lifting her off the ground as we spun on our deck, in our house, in our world. I thought about Richard and Regina. I thought about how they would try to control this child, how they would try to buy their affection with expensive toys and elite schools. And in that same instant, I made a silent oath. My son or daughter would never know that kind of conditional love. Would never hear that they aren't enough. Would never feel small so that others could feel big. "We won't tell them anything yet, right?" I asked when I put her down, both of us with tears in our eyes. "No," said Laura firmly. "They will find out when we decide. And if they want to be part of their life, they will have to earn it. They will have to ask for forgiveness. They will have to change. And if they don't, well, it will be their loss, not ours." I looked at my wife, who was no longer the scared daughter of the Sterlings, but the matriarch of our own family. We had walked through fire. We had faced the dragon. And we had come out scarred, but victorious. Our bank account didn't have 6 zeros, but our wealth was incalculable. We had peace, we had freedom, and above all, we had each other. Without filters, without judgments, without conditions. "To us," I said, raising my glass again. "To the family we chose," she replied. And under the night sky we toasted to the future, a future that, finally, belonged completely to us.